Compañeros, welcome to another edition of the SQL Data Partners Podcast. I am Carlos Chacon, your host, and with me I am joined today by Eugene Meininger.
Howdy, everybody.
And Eitan Blumin.
Hello, everyone.
So, Eitan, in addition to all your other credentials, right, as a SQL Server consultant, an architect, a podcast host as well.
Co-host.
Co-host, fair enough. I actually think in all of our 200 episodes, I think you are actually the furthest guest we've had.
What do you mean?
In terms of time zone, right? So we are recording 3 p.m. here at East Coast time, and it is after 10 p.m. where you are.
Oh, wow.
And, it is. Yeah,
yes.
it is.
So we appreciate you burning
time,
the midnight oil for us.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. If there's anyone for whom I will burn the midnight oil, that would be for you.
Hey, there we go. We feel special. and I should say, right, so as a co-host, right, of the SQL Server radio show, so you and Guy do that podcast, and we have always felt a bit, what's the word? I was going to say reverence. We've always always been a little bit jealous of how fearless you guys are. Fearless, particularly Guy on the podcast, and I've always looked up to that because we're always fretting over every little thing that we do sometimes, and then I listen to y'all, and it's just like, go, right? Like,
yeah, it is. It's our show is very much organic and more open-ended and like sort of free form.
Sure.
We stay away from any sort of structure and stuff like that. And I think at least at first, Matan was very hard on, used to edit every little thing.
Sure.
But it took so much time from him, and eventually, that he realized that it wasn't worth it.
Right.
So it stayed like that as part of the spirit of the show.
Yeah, you want to put out, obviously if there's, noise or things, right? Some of that stuff you want to kind of take into consideration. But I have found the same. People won't stop listening with an extra or well, or, right? Just go with it.
Let's go. Yeah.
Well, awesome. Well, we appreciate you being here, and you'll forgive us for putting a little bit of structure. So hopefully our structure is not too much of a barrier to our discussion.
That's okay. I think I'll handle it.
Okay. So before we get into it, our topic for today, right, ultimately is DevOps for the DBA. Now we're going to be specifically focused in on SQL Server Data Tools, right? Cool. But that idea of how can I start using some DevOps methodologies in my database, and this is a topic that it comes up now and then. I feel like some of us, won't name any names, right? But are screaming and kicking, in terms of hey, it's worked. This worked for me, right? And so we have a little problem letting go, but hopefully you can help us see the light here as we get into that. So before we do that, our show notes for today's episode are going to be at SQLDataPartners.com/SSDT for SQL Server Data Tool methods. So SSDT methods, or at SQLDataPartners.com/227. And we do have a couple of shout outs we want to give.
Oh, nice.
So Ian Groves. Now I think he's posting a solicitation, compañeros, right? I think that's what we're doing. So he said he's like, I had a blast presenting. He was talking about data professionals looking to leverage the Microsoft Government Community Cloud. Now, then he lays the question, what are the implications for best practices to be successful? And then he uses the hashtag #AskSDPP. So I feel confident that he has some answers because he just gave the presentation. but I feel like perhaps he's looking for some folks to give some input into, right, who's looking at it, or who might be interested. So perhaps, Ian, if you're listening, one of the things we should probably do is reach out and I say, hey, do you want to be a guest? Right? We can talk about government cloud, right? That might be something. Or compañeros, if those of you who are working for state agencies or government agencies looking to leverage the government cloud and have some questions, please pass them along, and we'll try to connect with Ian and get him, get those questions answered.
Nice.
So that's number one. The other one, FuseLab Creative, Data Augmented, Gaston Cruz, Heiko IT, Adriel Cabrera, Aaron Gupta, Anthony Fortner, and Ishmael Santos. And again, compañeros, if I have misspelled your name, please forgive me. Hope we can still be friends. But thanks again for giving us a little shout out on social media or connecting with us in some way. In terms of notes, other notes that I have include, so SQL Server 2016 is losing mainstream support coming up here quick, July 13th of this year. And while we make these announcements, I have generally not seen, if you've waited this long, that announcement is not going to move you, right? It's going to be like, okay, whatever, right? You're either already paying for extended support or you don't care, right? And you're just going to keep plugging away. So
that's a shame. That would be a shame.
That is a shame. So support, right, is the big thing. So what it has not happened in a while, but I'll go back to the security vulnerability that was given this earlier this year in the beginning, the extended events vulnerability, right? So we luckily have gotten a little bit used to Microsoft taking care of us from a security perspective, right? The number of vulnerabilities in SQL Server, just continues to go down and down and down. But they do still happen, and so just getting that patched and updated, is helpful. The other thing that I will plug, and Eitan, I will solicit your advice here, but the new features that are available, I don't just mean new features, but they've made more features available in standard as we get into the later versions, right? That make it a little easier to swallow in terms of functionality. Right?
In 2019, you mean?
What's that?
In 2019?
Well, in 2019, but even in 2016, I know we're talking about 2016 being supported, right? But then they had that Service Pack 1, where it was like, hey, we're going to start offering, right, what was enterprise, now in standard. And I think, every version, it seems like there is a little bit more that's offered in standard. Obviously, going to 2019, so if you're going to upgrade, right, that would be my recommendation, unless there's some big hiccup that that your environment has, and that that even has more goodies for you. So so what's your take? Is that fair? When you go to your customers and you're like, hey, by the way, mainstream support is ending next month. Does that move them, or I guess we've probably been sounding that alarm bell for a little while, so they're probably used to us hearing it by now, right?
Not necessarily. There was lots of noise about SQL Server 2008 and 2012 about them going out of support. I feel like that was more impactful, more significant.
Sure.
Because the difference from those versions was much more pronounced. There's it depends. We have all kinds of customers, and some of them, they, like you said, they don't mind about these things, and some of them they do mind very much, mostly because they have to keep up with regulations and make sure that they're on the latest updates. And if there are no more updates, then it's a problem.
One of the challenges we're having is, for example, we just had a customer that wanted to upgrade this last month, but they were hesitant because of the release cycle. And Microsoft hasn't announced a new feature, and we're not announcing one today. But they're like, well, what happens if they announce one at the end of the year, right? We will just have upgraded, and now we'll have to upgrade again, right? And so that was a little bit of a...
Are you talking about like upgrading to major versions?
Yes, they were at 2016, and they wanted to upgrade to 2019, right? But they were a little bit hesitant because they were afraid that there was going to be a 2021 version released, right? And now they were going to be right behind or have to, update again for whatever reason. And
Yeah,
so-
I gotta say about that. Starting with SQL 2012, actually, they started like shortening the time periods between the major versions, and at first I felt like very irked,
Sure.
very much. It bothered me a lot because upgrading a major SQL Server versions is not a small deal. It's serious downtime. It has very serious implications. Imagine enterprise environments that rely on this system, and it has serious implications. It's impractical
Sure.
to upgrade a major version every like 2-3 years even, because especially for large corporations, every such single upgrade operation could mean millions of dollars. Like in terms of preparation, of hardware, of the manpower required to plan and perform this thing. So for me, it was very weird that Microsoft decided to go that route,
Sure.
to shorten the time between major versions by this much. Like, if you ask me, I think like SQL Server 2014, we could have skipped that one.
Sure.
Maybe even 2017.
Well, that was a Linux release, right? That was the
the
if you were
Linux.
on Windows, well, there wasn't too much to add there. But if you wanted to go to Linux, right, then that was your puppy.
That's true. Yeah. Still though.
Yeah. No, I hear you. Yeah. Well, so it's interesting, right? So that's an interesting segue into our discussion, right? Into trying to do things faster and perhaps, right?
And more frequently.
And more
Yeah.
frequently, right? So there are definitely two ends of the spectrums, and it's not to say, it's not, so those pieces that you just described, we can't necessarily take all of it away. However, the tooling has become better, right, for us to be able to do a little bit more faster, and I think it's up to us to understand that a bit more, right? And
Yes.
And so with that, right, I guess let's go ahead and jump into the conversation a little bit there. So first, right, let's just lay the groundwork. So we talk about DevOps, right?
From the SQL Server perspective.
From a
Yeah.
SQL Server perspective, but so let's just kind of define what it is when we say DevOps for SQL Server. What's the thought process here? What is it that we're trying to accomplish? Let's start there, and then we'll go.
Okay. So basically, what we mean when we speak of DevOps and SQL Server is change automation, basically,
Okay.
which also could mean that when we want to implement, and then deploy changes to our database, this type of operation will be automated rather than manual. Manual as in like a DBA taking a bunch of SQL scripts and running them against the production. That will be the manual approach. Automated approach will mean that there'll be some kind of pipeline, some kind of automated process that would do that automatically. Whether that process is triggered manually or maybe periodically or automatically based on something else, which we'll get into, that's less important, but the process itself, the deployment, preferably would be automated.
So I love that. I love that description, right? So it's this idea that we're going to basically bundle or batch all the changes. So instead of siloing it, right, and be like, okay, right, devs, like we're going to start, shutting everything down, right? You guys do your piece, or the database guys, you guys run your piece. Let us know when you're done, right?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Then the devs are going to push their changes. It's like, no, this should all be a code set that I should be able to say, hey, this is what's changed, and I should be able to, audit, have audit capabilities, if you will, around that.
Yep.
And that also makes it a little, I'll say, less scary in my mind, because
less scary
because you can get, really fancy. Like I think you look at the, some of the things that they do in the development side, and it can be like, oh gosh. Right, it can be a little overwhelming, at least in my experience. Right. So
what do you mean? You mean like the DevOps on software development side?
On software development side.
Yeah, they're far ahead, man.
Oh yeah. That's right. Well, and because they, and their benefit is they don't have to worry so much about state.
Exactly.
Right. So that's the big hang up. But
the data is the problem here.
The data is the problem. That's right.
Yeah.
So.
If you're making a mistake, you lose the data. Yeah. Problem.
Yeah. Okay. So, and then in this case, right, the tool of choice that we're gonna talk about or focus on is SQL Server Data Tools.
Yes.
Right. Which, now correct me if I'm wrong, right? But in my mind, I kind of feel like has been merged. I mean, I'm not even sure why we still call it Data Tools, but I would just call it Visual Studio, right? I mean, it's really, right? I mean, it's
not exactly, but I think it's still considered as like it's inside Visual Studio, but it's you have to like install it specifically. It's a type of workload.
Okay, that's fair. So it's an add-on. It's an add-on, if you will, into Visual Studio. Okay, that's fair.
Go with that.
That's fair. Okay, so tell us. I guess maybe let's start in with that idea. So we're looking to batch our code, right, and then deploy all of that code together. So maybe talk us through how Data Tools does that, and some of the benefits that we get there.
Sure. So you were talking about batching our code before we deploy it.
Sure.
Which, correct me if I'm wrong, you mean like script, prepare the full change script?
Yes.
Yes. So all of the steps, you know exactly what is going to be executed against the target, and it would just run one by one.
Yes.
So
instead
what
of
you described,
current state or old state being right, like open this file, right? Step one, right? I highlight this.
Goodness.
I execute, like, okay, now the second thing, did that work? Okay, well, now we can run this script, Hey, I've been there.
At least you're not moving the bits.
Yeah.
Right.
Might as well, So what you're describing is actually called migration-based deployment. Because what you are deploying, what you're saving, and what you are deploying is your migration, the operation itself, which implements the migration. SSDT actually does not work like that. SSDT is based on state-based deployment. And how does that work? So SSDT or like SQL Server Database Project, when you build it in Visual Studio, it generates an artifact in the form of a DACPAC file. So that DACPAC file, inside of itself, it holds basically a representation of your entire database project, all of the objects, the scripts, the store procedures, and so on. And what happens is that there's a utility called SQL Package that is used for deploying these DACPAC files. SQL Package is actually older than SSDT, but it was utilized for this purpose. And it can either be SQL Package.exe, or you can also use the PowerShell module called DAC services, I think it's called. And also there is like something in DBA tools, speaking of PowerShell. So what that does, this utility, it takes the DAC pack and it compares it in runtime, in real time, during the deployment phase itself. It compares it against the target database. And the result of this comparison is basically a publish script or a change script, which is it is incremental. It's not like, you know, drop everything and create a new.
Sure.
If you added a new column, the result will be alter table add column.
Right.
Or add, or and so on. You know, you catch my drift. If a stop procedure exists, it will be alter procedure, not create procedure.
Right.
So this utility is very, very smart. It's very clever. I think it's in some way it's based on the Redgate schema compare.
Oh.
I think it has very long ago, around 2015. No, even before that, 2005, I think. It was somewhere around that time when Microsoft, I think they bought this technology from Redgate, and they utilized it into Visual Studio at the time. It was I think it was in Visual Studio 2005. That was like the first time.
That sounds about right. But it was pretty new then. I was going to say maybe even just
it was very new.
Yeah.
It was very scary because there was nothing like this before that.
Sure.
And everyone was, rightfully so, very, very frightened of it.
I was going to say, no, maybe the data people were frightened, but those developers, man, they were like, wham, 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 you know, let's just move this stuff around, you know? Hey, this is easy. Now I can finally see what's wrong, you know? Hey, we need to alter that table? Let's do it. You know, 10 million records? Who cares? Let's give it a new primary key.
Oh, goodness. Hopefully there's a team leader somewhere in there. Well, from what I saw, everyone was terrified of this thing.
Yeah.
Even the developers. But we've gone a long way since then.
Oh, sure.
The tooling has improved very much since then. It is by far, very reliable compared to what it was back then. So anyways, we're talking about deployment, right? So
sure.
During the deployment phase itself, as I said, there's the comparison, and then a change script is generated, and that change script is applied on the target database in order to line it up with the DACPAC file, which is basically works as like the single source of truth, right? So that means that if you take the same artifact, the same DACPAC, deploy it to one target, and you have like some kind of change script that is actually being run, and then you deploy the exact same DACPAC against a different target that could be a bit different in terms of the schema objects, you would possibly get a different change script, because there would be different objects, different states in the target database that would need to be aligned differently.
Gotcha. Sure.
So this methodology, step-based deployment, serves as a way to get rid of and prevent schema drift, version drift, which basically means that you could have like, let's say you have the test server and you have the production server and the staging server. And unless you have something like this in place to enforce, to prevent version drift, you could have differences in schema, and you would have a bunch of procedures in staging that don't exist in production.
Oh, sure.
You know how it goes. Yeah, there's
indexes,
lots of mess.
Right? That are all over the place. Triggers that are half-developed things that you're like, well, and then nobody never knows, like, is this really needed?
Yeah, exactly. And then we get what I actually tend to see a lot of real world scenarios, like actual customers that they have like people that this is like their full-time job to like perform every time there's like a deployment. They need to do like a comparison between their, let's say, staging and production, and then they have to pick and choose. Okay, I checked in the latest version, the latest release. Okay, this one changed, this one changed, this one didn't, this one changed, and then they have to manually pick and choose the modules that changed and apply those changes to the production. So when you do state-based deployment, that pretty much removes all that hassle. Of course, there's also a disadvantage, possibly, maybe, not necessarily, but there could be a disadvantage in terms of, at least from my experience, I get to hear a lot of people that are scared of this approach because they would prefer to know and be certain of what is being run against their production server. And they don't want to see any sort of like surprises,
Sure.
Which is, it makes sense. It's completely legitimate.
Right. You're responsible for it, right? If something goes wrong, they're going to blame you. They're going to, the CEO is going to be in your cubicle, right? Being like, hey, when's it going to be back up, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Where did that table go?
Yeah.
Yeah, it worked in staging. What happened?
Yeah.
But actually, what should be done is implement proper development methodologies with your databases to prevent these sort of issues.
Yeah. And this is where I think the challenge is, because the amount of work, there may be an increase or potentially decrease, but I think it's negligible, right? So I don't think the amount of work really changes, but the way you have to do that work changes a little bit, right? How you review that, or and obviously the tooling, right, that you're using, things like that, right? Because you can review the scripts that are going to get run, right?
Yeah, it's possible. Yeah, you can set up like a pipeline or something, any kind of automated process that would, instead of just straight go ahead and publish the changes, just generates the script,
right?
And then you can review it before actually publishing it. That's totally possible. But hopefully, if you are in that phase of doing something like that, hopefully that will be temporary, because the proper approach would be to first of all get rid of version drift across your deployment phases.
Sure, get everything back in sync, right?
Yeah, get everything in sync. Get like a baseline, a proper baseline, stable baseline. And then implement proper development methodology. Which what do I mean by that? So let's say you have a table, and for whatever reason you want to add a new column. So normally someone could go ahead and say, you know what, I have 10 columns in this table. I want this new column to be the fourth one. Why? Because I don't know. Because there's like an alphabetical order. I don't know.
Right. Sure.
But that would mean that in order to do that, it's not possible in SQL Server to add a column, in the middle of the table. It has to be at the end.
Right.
Otherwise, you have
table.
to recreate. Yeah, exactly. To create a entirely new table, move all of the data there from the old table. And that's very dangerous, especially if the table is big. It could be very easy to do in development or in the test server, but in production, the same table could be very big and have different implications. So a proper development methodology in this case would be to never add columns in the middle of a table, only at the end. no matter what.
Right. So that's going to break a lot of that notion, or some of the heartburn there that I can think of. For example, is I want all my audit columns at the end, right? So the date created, date created by,
Right.
last updated, all that stuff. So unfortunately, that's not possible anymore, or at least in this process, right?
Not that it's not possible. It's not preferable.
Fair enough. Right?
It's dangerous.
Sure.
It could be problematic.
So a question with some of that, does this system warn you whenever it's going to take an irreversible step? Like if I rename a column. Okay, I was going to ask, because if I rename a column and I'm like, you know what, that's a dumb column name. You can just undo it. Everything's fine for the most part, right? Unless you'd stuff maybe depending on it. But if I say, you know what, we're never going to need like that varchar 50. That's too many chars. So we're going to make it 10. And then you realize that maybe, okay, I thought my zip codes only went up to 10, but we've got some Canadian zip codes, or we got the extra like dash for, I don't even know what y'all do over there. I'm assuming that it warns you like, hey, here's the big red button. There's no going back. This is a destructive change, right?
You assume right.
Good.
Actually assume right. There actually is such a functionality in SSDT.
Nice.
It is also turned on by default.
So
in order to turn it off, you have to
newer version. Is that like a 2016 type of thing? Because I feel like back in the day, it used to be a little bit more Wild West. I mean,
yeah, I don't actually recall exactly. I think
Which
you're
version?
right that it wasn't the default
before at one time. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That's good.
It is now.
It is now. So everybody upgrade your SSDT. If you're using the old version, you got to upgrade.
Yeah, definitely. So this setting that we're talking about is called prevent incremental changes if data loss might occur.
Gotcha.
So that includes what you described, Eugene, of reducing the length of a variable data type. It also includes removing columns, dropping objects,
right,
and completely changing data types. Like for example, from big int to int, from varchar to int, and so on.
Right.
Any sort of change like that could potentially have data loss, you can prevent it. And then what happens is that this change script that I talked about earlier, what happens is that when SQL package detects that there's a difference in this kind, and the setting is turned on as it is by default, then it begins the change script like right at the top, before anything else. There's like a check if exists. Select from that table, then raise an error, and then the whole script stops, because there's also like a what's it called? Set no exec on. You know this setting? In SQL Server, there's a setting called set no exec on, which means that any subsequent command actually doesn't do anything.
Oh, interesting. Gotcha.
Until you explicitly run set no exec off.
Gotcha. No, I hadn't heard about that. Although it's funny, when Carlos was talking about running stuff one piece at a time, I was thinking about how like sometimes in like demos or even production scripts, we'll put in something that would cause an error, like a divide by zero. So if you accidentally hit the run all, it'll just stop it, so it can't it can't run. Like I've lived that life of like, you have everything commented out and you select the part that you want to run and you run just that.
Yeah.
So it reminds me of that, but cleaner, it sounds like.
Yeah. So so that's what SQL package is using for that purpose. And then the whole deployment stops basically with that error.
So one of the other
There's
pieces.
also
Oh, go ahead.
just to tie the knot on that.
Yeah. Let's do it.
There are also separate settings that you can use that can either prevent or allow the dropping of objects of certain types at the target if they don't exist in the source. Like you can, first of all, you have a setting that says, I permit the dropping of objects that are in target but not in source. And you can also say, I permit that, but I want to ignore dropping tables or ignore dropping procedures.
Nice.
And so on. Like there's a full list of these object types that you can configure.
Yeah, so the granularity has gotten a lot better than because again, back in the day, it was not quite so kind.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Speaking of granularity, actually, you can. That also is relevant for the comparison itself, the basic comparison of whether you want to change an object. That granularity also exists at that level for different object types. Let's say you want to ignore functions. I don't know, whatever. You want to ignore what's called partition schemes, and so on. There's a huge list of object types that you can set.
Very cool. Now, one of the other pieces we haven't talked about, but I feel like in the bundling of it, is the integration, and maybe this is above and beyond, but the integration with source control. Right?
It's very important. It's critical even.
There we go.
It's that's a critical part of, let's say, implementing DevOps methodology in your organization. First step is source control. You have to have source control. Because usually source control is the source of your, let's say, the versions, those versions that you want to release, you want to publish. The pipeline, the automated pipeline that would be responsible for doing that, its source would be the source control. So, and also there's all kind of methodologies and mechanisms to integrate the two. For example, you can have, let's say, the main branch and the develop branch. And let's say that when one creates a pull request to merge between the develop branch and the master branch, main branch, sorry. So that would be the trigger for an automation, for an automatic pipeline that will be responsible for building the artifact and, let's say, comparing generating the script, or if the merge is actually done, like the pull request is completed, then that will trigger the pipeline and lead to eventually deploying to production.
Sure.
You can play around with it, right? Like maybe you have feature branches that would merge into develop branch, and that would trigger a build pipeline and to like a test server. There's all kinds of phases, and you can play around with it.
So, admittedly, this can be right. So, from an old knuckle dragging Neanderthal like myself, it can be a little bit intimidating because these are all, particularly when you start working with developers, because they have to use this, right? They start working with code day one, they're in this, and so those pull requests and branches and all of that language and culture is ingrained in there already, and that can be a little bit challenging. So I know that there are more and more folks like yourself, right? Like we're trying to do in this podcast, trying to educate a little bit those who aren't as well versed in it or are new to it, in making that a bit more approachable. So I guess I'm curious and they're going to come at it from a data side, right? I think if you just go and look at some other, I've gotten lost more times than I care to admit. You start looking at Git, and whatnot, and you're just like, Right. So perhaps, I know you have some information, right? You've published some, sessions and whatnot, right? But I'm curious, where would you go, or what other recommendations would you make for good places to kind of get started with some of that terminology and like the how-to, if you will, right?
So I have my own webinar that I delivered on this topic.
Oh, here we go.
It talks about source control among other things, but source control is also part of like very basic, at the overview level. I'll send you links to the recordings, and then you could put it in the show notes.
Of course.
I also found a few presentations on YouTube from, let me recall the name, David Muller. So there's a dude called David Muller on YouTube. He has 3 videos there, basically for introduction to Git. And I saw those videos, and then they're done very well. It goes into detail, but it's very approachable. It doesn't throw you right into the the deep water. It starts in phases, getting you familiar with the basics, the basic concept, and then moves on from there. And so I'll send you links to that as well. I think those are good places to start. I think also Brent Ozer has like 1 or 2 videos on the subject.
Oh, does he?
Git or GitHub?
No, I haven't seen it. I was going to go with the Redgate. We kind of brought up Redgate before, right? They've been pushing. Of course, they have a lot of tooling, right? They have a source control tool, right? They're a lot of their stuff may lean a little bit towards their tooling. But in terms of getting started from a data-centric perspective, I have found their stuff to be helpful in the past.
Yeah, I have a recommendation, not specific to data at all, or even the tooling, but the canonical book about DevOps is the Phoenix Project. That was the book that got it to click for me. Why is this a thing? Although I have to warn you, it's like watching a slow speed car wreck for any IT person. You read the book and you're like, oh no, I've written accounting programs in Access before. You know what I mean? You're like, oh no, I've been that guy.
Oh no, I know what is going to happen next.
No, it was painful. It was a painful read, but it was good because I started to understand better why there's such a focus about doing smaller changes. You talked about how traditionally, if we want to migrate to SQL Server 2019, that might be millions of dollars. But not only that, Carlos, you were talking about the fact you've got this big script of 50 different changes because as an IT person, as a sysadmin or a DBA, you're like, I'm doing this over a weekend because I need time to run it, test it, and roll it back if I screwed something up, right?
Sure.
And the whole idea with DevOps is no. Bigger changes mean bigger mistakes. So let's try and make them as small as possible. You want to change the name of a column? Let's do it now, And the Phoenix Project, that book really helped me understand why there was such a big push in that direction. And as a data person, that's a really hard change for me to deal with because, again, I've done those weekend migrations, right? Or you're setting up high availability or you're doing something and you're like, look, I need all the business people out of here. I need nobody working on anything because stuff might hit the fan and I need time.
That's right. I have my superhero cape over here in the corner and I will use it if I have to.
Oh, yeah. I'm glad I write reports now. Nothing critical happens when you break a report.
Living the life.
Yeah. Tell you what.
I heard about the book. Obviously, I heard very good stuff about it. I actually didn't have the chance to read myself.
Yeah, I recommend check out the audiobook because then you can just listen to it. I thought it was pretty well done. That's how I read it. Is I listened to the audiobook. Again, the big thing is just like be prepared for like flashbacks to your worst IT job.
I think that's the idea, actually.
Yeah,
that's the purpose.
Yeah, well, and like it's one of those books that I could imagine giving to a non-technical family member. Like, here, listen to this. This is why I quit my last job. You know.
Yeah, nightmare scenario, on
now,
both sides.
Interestingly enough, one of the last place I tried to implement DevOps in the database, a architect, right? We were in the review. I had checked all of I had made the database objects and put them all into source control, right? Kind of showed them the process. We met with the team and with the lead architect, who looked at it and said, I don't think we need this.
Need what? The changes?
Need to put the database into source control. Right? So I suppose that Eugene gave us some ideas to be like, here, go read this book and then come back to me.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. But what other so obviously, so knowledge or knowing how to do it is one reason. What are some of the other obstacles that you see, if I'm a data person and I'm not doing this already? You mentioned, I guess, getting your version, or schema drift, right? So getting all your systems back in order. That's another common problem, right? Because it's like sometimes the developers don't know what they need, right? And so do you just, how do you overcome some of those pieces, right? I guess does that make sense?
Yeah. So if we're talking about the version drift, like the initial operation of lining up your environment, straightening them out. I would say that start with like manual comparison. Like SSDT has built-in schema compare, which is pretty much the same as the Redgate schema compare. It also has data compare, which is also the same as the Redgate data compare. Yeah. But specifically, we're talking about the schema compare in this regard.
Now, having said that, and you'll forgive me because I know that so one of the new changes is Community Edition. Do you happen to know, does it exist in Community Edition too? Okay,
it does. Okay. Yes, that means, folks, pay attention. SSDT is free.
Very nice.
Yeah. Yes. Okay, good.
So,
good.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, Community Edition, that's like the free edition of Visual Studio.
Right.
It has some limitations compared to the professional, enterprise, and so on, but the basic functionality is there, including full support for SSDT.
Yeah, so that's good to know.
Totally. You don't even need a license.
Right. So no excuses then. Well, from a software perspective, right? You don't have to go and ask to purchase this. Hey, can I buy this? Yeah.
What was the question? Sorry, we were talking about.
You were talking about obstacles and getting
obstacles.
some, so schema drift. Or so now I have 3 different environments and I have no idea what's where.
Yeah, so you can use the manual schema compare to first of all, get on top of things and see, okay, what are the differences, and based on what you see, you can decide, okay, all of these differences. Like, let's say I have the development server with hundreds of stop procedures with _Adrian _V2 old new final 2.
Hey, have you been looking at my database?
That is so common. That is so common. So, first of all, get on top of things. See what is the current status of your version drift and know what is happening in your databases. Usually, you should know how to deal with that. After once you see it, you should have like a basic idea of, okay, I can drop that, I cannot drop that. This one, okay. Actually, there's like a table in production. It's missing in development. It should be there. Okay, that's an insight, So that should help you get on top of things, and and then it's up to you, right? You can either decide to apply those changes manually, at least for this first time, just to line up the environment, or you can do it using the source control route, right? Make all the necessary changes in source control, and from there, the pipeline will do the rest and line those things up. So it's up to you. It depends, right?
And then take the money that you would have spent on Visual Studio, because now that it's free, and go take the developers out to lunch, so that you can make that a little bit more, a little easier on yourself, so that they'll answer your emails, right?
Some bribe money, yeah.
Hey, it doesn't hurt, right? Pizza, whatever it is, right? It doesn't hurt to feed people, make things happen a little easier.
So there are also more obstacles beyond that, actually.
Sure.
Like as you said before, like the experience obstacle of people being inexperienced in source control, inexperienced in these terminologies of what is state-based deployment, what is the migration-based deployment, and all of these things. So there is obviously a learning curve. It is actually not as steep as it would seem for an outsider. I mean, I recall that when I first got into this, it looked like very foreign, very strange, like a completely separate world, and it looks scary and confusing.
Sure.
So there is a learning curve, but once you take those first few steps and start to experiment with it, like when I say it, I mean working with source control specifically. You start experimenting, playing around with it a bit. It becomes a lot easier, and things start to click. Oh, now I understand what is a commit. Now I understand what is a push, and what is a merge, what is a pull request, and so on. Once you start to do things. There's an old saying that goes how it goes. If I heard it, I forgot it. If I saw it, I remember it. If I did it, I understand it.
There we go. There we go.
So that's my tip in that regard. Just start playing around with it, experimenting with it, practicing a bit, and with time it'll click, and you'll know where to go from there. Another obstacle that I have witnessed is it's a bit tough to tackle, and that is the obstacle of time management. And what I mean by that is that I see teams that they're very much tangled in their everyday schedule, and they have everyday tasks to work on, and they have their own priorities, daily priorities, ongoing stuff that happen all the time, which they need to be busy with those things, and then they don't have the time to, okay, now we need to fix our version drift and line up our environments and put our database into the source control and set up the pipeline. These are things that also take time, and it's difficult to give priority to these things unless the prioritizations comes from above in the organization. So what I saw is that unless the commanding department or team, whatever the organizational unit is into it, it's going to be very difficult to do.
Yeah.
Because the developers could be very eager to start working with DevOps and put stuff into source control and set up pipelines and so on. But meanwhile, the management could be like, no, we have like a version that needs to come out next week, and we have these bunch of tasks and this huge backlog of stuff that we need to do. And then you don't have the time, and you can't get this thing prioritized. So I think that in this regard, the most important thing is to convince the management to be into it and to understand the benefits of going into it. Because once you implement change automation, once you have source control and DevOps and automatic pipelines, so much money and time and sweat and money that goes on psychiatry can be saved if the organization goes in that way. There's like a very, very, very significant ROI in going into DevOps, even if it's databases that we're talking about.
Sure. Yeah, I think if the managers can see, right, that time is money. Again, easier said than done. Obviously they have their own priorities, right? And if they have a priority that, they don't feel like this could help them, because, it is kind of a sidetrack a little bit, right?
But it's important, yeah. It's important to... I mean, I see it a lot, right? I didn't see it just once. I see it several times that the developers, the development team or R&D team, they came to us and like, we need assistance with this thing to get on board the DevOps train. And we're like, yeah, sure, let's go, okay. And then do this and that and this and that. And here's how. And they're like a week goes by and they're like, no, we didn't get to it. And we had other more urgent stuff. And it's hard to move things forward like this.
Sure.
Because these things come from management, usually.
That's true.
You need management to be on board.
That is true, right? So we hate to leave everybody on a downer, right? And with management controls your destiny, right? So
no, but it's actually it's good that it's good to know this, because then you can know where to focus your energies. You need to focus your energy on convincing
Sure.
management on the importance and the benefits of this thing.
There we go. We need to have another session. I don't think we've talked about it in a while. I can't remember. I don't have my episode notes in front of me here, or by the past episodes, but on convincing your manager on how to do something, right? We need to have a session on that, I think.
Cool. That is very important, yeah.
Sure.
Money is the name of the game.
Yeah.
If you can get to the bottom line, money, then
it makes the
you
conversation
got them in your
easier.
pocket.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, very good. So I know we've kind of we've hit on some points, right? We've talked a little bit about why, right? The benefits of it. How to avoid a complete catastrophe, and then some of the sticky points in getting started, and kind of how you need to overcome some of those. I guess last thoughts on this.
I have some last thoughts.
Here we go.
There was a session that I saw, I think it was a few months ago, I don't recall exactly, but it was a brilliant session. It's not directly related to SSDT or necessarily source control, but it's related to database deployments.
Okay.
And it is a session delivered by Alex Yates as part of SQL Friday. The session is called, if I recall correctly, Near Zero Downtime Database Deployments, where he lists several methodologies that can be used for like really near zero downtime. When you deploy changes, and these are very, very useful methodologies. I love that session. It's one of the most useful sessions that I hands down that I've ever seen.
There we go. We'll have to get Alex. So Alex is a former Red Gator. I know he is a independent consultant now. He may have people working for him. I don't know. But he's over in Europe, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and basically it's focused on continuous integration, database DevOps. That's kind of his background. Okay. Yeah, very good. We'll have to link to it.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, well, awesome. Well, thanks for the conversation. I guess Eugene, last questions before we move on here.
No, I think we're good.
So should we go ahead and do SQL Family?
Sure.
Okay, very good. So how did you first get started with SQL Server?
It was very long ago. I started it in the military, actually.
Oh.
I was in basically a team of DBAs in a technological unit.
Wow.
And I cannot provide any further details on that.
Sure. Well, that's interesting that you kind of got to jump. You kind of got to jump in there, right? Because I think a lot of us, kind of end up there, through various paths. But it's interesting that you just kind of jumped right in.
I was very lucky.
Sure.
I was very, very lucky. I actually wanted to be a developer at the time. But I heard lots of good things about being a DBA, and I was offered the job, the position. I was like, yeah, sure, let's try it out.
There we go.
And I ended up falling in love with it.
Very good. Now, what advice would you give to someone wanting to pursue a career similar to yours?
First of all, have a passion for the topic, and specifically for a passion for problem solving, and for being able to continuously learn and improve your skills. And what I see sometimes, people in my field, that like their starting position or maybe their end goal is like the paycheck.
Sure.
Like, yeah, I saw the how's it called, the
salary
those, lists.
Yeah.
Those lists where they
like job rankings or job
the job rankings. Yeah, when you see the average paycheck per position type and stuff like that, and DBAs pay nice. Yeah, okay, let's go for that.
Sure.
No. No, that's not the way. If you go that way, you're gonna you will tend to stay a rookie for your whole life, basically, because you wouldn't have actual passion for the topic, for the job itself. You need to love what you do and enjoy the job, not just go to job because you have to, because of the paycheck, but because you enjoy doing it.
Sure.
That's what I think.
Very good. What's one thing that can instantly make your day better?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I would bet that if you had asked me this like a few months ago, I would probably have a different answer.
Sure.
Yeah, that answer will probably change with
being
time.
able to leave the house, right, without a mask, right? That could...
Actually, we already passed that, so you can.
Oh, there we go.
That.
Check that off. Yeah.
Yeah. But you're asking me right now, so my current answer is to have a clear schedule. Schedule is busted, and it's full, and I don't have time for anything, basically. Yeah, well, we have a few free days just to breathe.
There we go. Well, we appreciate
start with doing nothing.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate you making a little time for us then. So you've got $10,000, and I don't know what the conversion rate is, so you'll forgive me. I didn't think to convert that ahead of time. I apologize. Well, what computer tech would you?
It'll be around. Well, actually, I'm not. To be truthful, I'm not actually a big spender on computer tech. If I personally had $10,000, and I would just put them in a bank or in savings or invest in stocks or something like that. That's how I am. The most I have ever spent on computer or technology was for a gaming rig that I bought. It costs around around 2,500 bucks PC, plus $1,000 VR set. That's the most I ever spent.
There we go. Okay.
But the rest will probably go to, I don't know, Azure Cloud Spending, I guess.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. You get eaten up pretty quick there.
Yeah.
Now, which famous person in history would you want to spend the day with?
Carl Sagan. Definitely.
Really?
Really. Man, that I can spend whole day just listening to his voice talk about anything.
Yeah.
You can talk about the color of birds, and I was like, oh yeah.
Yeah. There you go.
The way he speaks, it's so captivating. It's like hypnosis.
Now, have you? So does that mean that you have called in to the Wait, Don't Tell Me to try to get his voice on your email or your voicemail? You know?
That's funny.
I wish. No, I'm not that old actually.
Yeah.
I by the time I learned about Carl Sagan, it was already after he passed away.
Got you.
But I had a lot catching up to do.
Sure.
But it was very easy to fall in love with the man. Like it's.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, Eitan, the last question we have for you today. What's your favorite ice cream topping?
It will be dulce de leche.
Hey, there we go. An Argentine product, if I've ever heard of it.
Yeah, I love it. I love the taste of it. And if it's combined with vanilla and chocolate, even better.
Even better. There we go. I like it. Very good. I know the folks in Argentina will be happy as well. So give him a little shout out. Well, awesome. Well, Eitan, thanks so much for being on the program with us today. We're gonna put up some of the pieces that you mentioned up on the show notes, your webinar and whatnot at SQLDataPartners.com/SSDT methods. But folks may want to reach out to you on social media. How can they get in touch with you?
Oh man, I have a whole list. So you can find me on Twitter at Eitan Blumin. That's the handle. I also have my own blog, eitanblumin.com. I also write at Madeira Data Solutions. So that will be madeiradata.com/blog. I'm also on LinkedIn. I think I actually don't remember my handle. I think it's Eitan.Blumin. LinkedIn. No, it's without the dot. Just one
dot.
word.
Okay.
And I'm also on GitHub. And on Facebook, that would be Eitan Blumin blog. And like a whole bunch of other networks.
So, compañeros, you've got no excuse, right? You want to connect with Eitan. He's giving you lots of options, right?
Yep.
So the opposite of Kevin, right? You have lots of opportunities here. So
Right.
And Eugene?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at SQLgene, and you can find my blog and my newsletter at SQLgene.com. Nice, simple, easy.
And you can connect with me, compañeros, on LinkedIn. I am at Carlos L. Chacon. Thanks again for being here, tuning in wherever you may be. Eitan, thanks again for your time. And
thank you for having me.
Yeah, I better let you go before you turn into a pumpkin, or before a guy gets mad at us for keeping you up so late tonight. So, thanks again. We do appreciate it. And compañeros, I hope to see you on the SQL Trail.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
SQL Data Partners.